Hello, I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With the breeding season underway, dairy specialist Martina Gormley considers the benefits of achieving a high 6-week calving rate.
So the national average is currently 63% and the target is 80%. So we're behind in the tune of 17%. I suppose, firstly, the reason for 80% as a target is to avoid having late calving cows. And I think that's a really important point. Herds with a poor 6-week calving rate, they will have later calving cows in their herd, and this will reduce profitability and increase workload.
And just on the 63%, have we consistently been there for the last number of years, or are we climbing and improving the 6-week calving rate?
It is slightly, I was looking back on figures, and it has slightly improved from 57% in 2014 to 63% now, but it's very, very slow.
And when we speak about the importance of 6-week calving rate, there are financial implications for achieving the target of 80%. Can you put a figure on that?
Yes, so the monetary loss is €8.22 for every 1% decrease in 6-week calving rate. So this figure comes from 5 key areas. So we're looking at milk solids, extra heifer rearing costs, extra feeding costs, more labour because of extra weeks calving. And when you break down into those costs, so firstly, milk solids. So what's happening there is milk solids are reduced because of the later calving cows in the herd. And then they have less days in milk per year in the herd. They're also producing a lot more of their milk indoors. So having cows producing milk indoors will increase costs, and a lot of the time these cows are producing milk on poor quality silage. So also feed costs are higher with the with heifers because these heifers are born later due to a spread out calving pattern. These heifers will have a difficulty to reach the target weight for calving down at 24 months, and they tend to be kept on longer until they reach the target weight. So in terms of labour, in the long run, the hours of work will increase, and this is because you're spending extra weeks calving cows, and then you're also spending extra weeks feeding calves. Also, another consequence in terms of labour is that farmers who are achieving the 80% 6-week calving rate, they have an opportunity at the back end of the year to dry off the full herd if they choose to do that, because they have got the majority of the milk out of the cows within that year. So really, when you look at it, it's a vicious cycle having a poor 6-week calving rate, and it leads to a lot of inefficiencies.
The breeding season has kicked off on many farms in the last week or two and will continue over the coming months. What can farmers do practically to ensure that they hit a high 6-week calving rate?
So there's a number of things that they can do, I suppose, in no particular order. Thin cows. So I know it's getting a little bit late now, but there still is a bit of time. So cows that are under the desired body condition score of, we'll say, 2.75 to 3, they will have lower conception rates. So the proven method that we have of putting weight on cows while they're milking is to put them on once a day milking. And this may have to be done depending on the animal and depending on the weight gain you want for anywhere from maybe 3 to 4 weeks. Another key area will be tail painting all cows. So 21 days before your mating start date, put tail paint on all the cows. And the purpose of this is that you put the tail paint on today, you leave the cows be, you don't observe, you don't take notes of when they're in heat or anything like that. And on the day of your mating start day, you will look at the cows who have the tail paint still on. You will look at when they calve down, and if they calve down 35 days or more, plus any cows that you know had a particular problem, be it calving difficulty or rotating cleanings or so on and so forth, those are the cows that need to be drafted out straight away. The vet needs to be called, and those animals need to be treated. So the purpose of this is that the cows will get back cycling quicker at the beginning of your mating start date, and this will prevent those cows from becoming late calving cows. Um, Another key area is submission rates, and this needs to be monitored. So for heifers, the target is that 100% of your heifers would be served in the first 3 weeks of the breeding season. And with cows, it's 90% of the cows to be served in the first 3 weeks and 100% by 6 weeks. So to keep the process simple and reduce the workload, in particular with the heifers, a lot of farmers will synchronize the heifers using estromate. So there'll be one injection given, we'll say, on day one. Then the heifers will be served on visual heats being seen, and then the second injection will be given to any of the heifers that haven't shown heat around day 11, and then after that the bull will be put in at that stage. So I think it's important to try and keep it as simple as we can. Another key area for farmers will be using high EBI bulls. So in particularly focusing on the fertility sub-index for the 6-week calving rate, because cows with a high fertility sub-index have been shown to cycle earlier, they have stronger heats, they have better conception rates. So this is another key area in helping to increase your submission rates to therefore have a higher 6-week calving rate. Another important thing just on the bulls there, when you're picking your bulls, for heifers, we need to make sure that the heifers are under the bulls for the heifers are under 2% calving difficulty, and that they are proven for their calving difficulty scores, because we do not want any problems with heifers in calving down, because this is really going to affect the heifers going back and calf again.
And I suppose just to recap on that, once a day milking for the thin cows, tail painting all of the animals that are presented for breeding, achieving high submission rates, 100% in the first 3 weeks for the heifers and 90% for the cows, and then selecting high EBI stock with a particular emphasis on the fertility subindex, and with the heifers focus on easier calving bulls. I suppose then, if we look at the 6-week calving rate and achieving a high 6-week calving rate, we want a high fertility herd, and you've alluded to that. And that can be achieved by either bringing in a lot of heifers, and that would essentially mean that you have a high replacement rate and a young herd, or having a high fertility status within your herd of cows and lower replacement rates. If you have an issue within your herd of dairy cows, would you advise, to look at bringing in a high level of heifers and getting rid of the low fertility cows?
Yes, I suppose there's a few different approaches, and one approach is bringing in a high number of replacements. This will certainly speed up the process. So you may have to purchase these heifers from a high EBI herd. They will be calving up front. Their genetics will be very good for fertility. And these are the type of animals that you want calving up front. But I think one of the key things with that, be it purchasing animals to increase your replacement rate, or if you have them yourself, is that your management has to be very, very good around the breeding times, and in terms of the body condition score of the animals, because you could buy in or breed some very good animals for fertility, but if your management is poor around tail painting and treating animals on time, you will quickly those animals will end up being calving later on in the season, and which is going to have a big effect on your 6-week calving rate.
And I suppose as well we need to consider that where we're bringing in a high level of heifers, there will be suboptimal performance in the herd,
Yes.
with younger stock.
Yes, so look, you're going to be looking at 75% of mature cow yield off the heifers. So if you're bringing in a 30% replacement rate versus what your norm was 20%, yes, you have to take that into account in terms of your milk receipts coming in.
You mentioned 20% there in terms of replacements. Would that be the optimum, or could you recommend an optimum for replacements?
Yeah, so I suppose the optimum is 18 to 18%. And for herds that have very good genetics and very good management in terms of breeding, they're at around 18%, or occasionally at times we'll say 16 to 18%. And that gives them an option of, we'll say, having maybe 10% or a little bit less of cows empty at the back end of the year, and then some voluntary culling. So there might be 6 to 8% there for voluntary culling.
So I guess finally, Martina, some farmers are adverse to pushing their 6-week calving rate too high. We mentioned the average is 63%. Some farmers are up at 90% and greater. But where farmers are adverse, it's generally due to the heavy workload over the concentrated calving period in February and early March. Is this justified?
It is. I suppose the first thing we need to look at is how we look at the 6-week calving rate. So as you've said there, Emma Louise, 63% is the national average, and the target is 80%. And some farmers, yes, have brought this to 90%. So if you take a 100 cow herd, and you're at 63 cows in 6 weeks, so that's around 10 cows per week. Or if you're achieving your target, which is 80%, that's 80 cows over 6 weeks, which is about 13 cows per week on average. So the difference isn't really as big as we may perceive it to be. However, with either the national average 6-week calving rate or the target of 80%, facilities are key to either. You're not going to get away easily with having poor calving facilities and calf facilities. So a lot of the time I see on farms is that the number of cubicles are in place, but the calving facilities and the calf facilities aren't suitable at all for calves and for group calving, for calving cows in groups. And really, when you look from a cost point of view, these buildings are the lowest cost, as they don't require tanks. So I think planning for additional and simple calving and calf facilities are extremely important, and will greatly reduce the workload with any 6-week calving rate. I see farmers calving cows in individual pens, and this adds major hassle and stress, regardless of where you are in terms of your 6-week calving rate. So, look, I would say a simple shed for cows where they can be grouped will provide great comfort to the cows and to the farmer. And again, with the calves, a simple shed where calves can be grouped, and very important, the calves can be all under the one shed and not have to be going to different sheds with milk.
That's great. Thank you, Martina.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Martina Gormley for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.